Welcome to the Ghost Stories YouTube channel. Here, we will bring you the scariest experiences through ghost stories, mysteries, and inexplicable mysteries of the mysterious world. Whether you are someone who enjoys learning about ghost stories or simply looking for a new entertainment experience, our channel will be the ideal destination. Join us in the horror space and get ready for the most tense and scary moments. Don't forget to press the subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss any new videos. Thank you for joining the Ghost Stories YouTube channel, and now, get ready for some spooky moments with us.
7 Freaky Nights. Chapter 6, Friday Night, The Girl in the Snow. In early winter, the temperature gets lower and lower. Leaves are falling on the ground, everywhere is a gloomy atmosphere. The cold winds kept blowing into the small house. The room was empty at this time, only two people remained, Truonkiat and Thach Enem. Vuongtho died, Tom Tien and Thuong Gia Bang went on a business trip, and the two girls, Ha Tu Din and Tri U Duc Tin, disappeared. Everyone gradually left after telling stories, and it was not known whether their departures had anything to do with the stories they told or not. Truonkiat and Thach Enem felt something unusual in their hearts. Time passes so quickly and the weekend is here again. So he was able to rest. Truonkiat did not go out, locked himself in his room and watched the police. Video games quickly made him forget what he had encountered, becoming a resilient soldier. Truonkiat played very passionately, suddenly felt a cold wind blowing through him, as if someone had just passed around and stood right behind him. He suddenly shivered, held his breath, turned his head around, but there was nothing behind him except the constantly swaying curtains. Turning around, he discovered that the computer screen was completely black. He immediately restarted it, but it still had no effect. When I turn on the light doesn't turn on. When I pick up the phone to call, the phone doesn't have any signal lines at all. Then a cold wind blew as if someone had just passed by and was still standing behind him. He turned around in fear, but there was no one behind him. He was so scared that he didn't dare to sit back, so he quickly went to find Thach Enem to ask if the whole building had lost power. Seeing that Thach Enem was in the room and kept pressing the crackling light switch, Truonkiat breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out the power was really out. The two of them did not tell each other what they had just encountered and talked happily. Today is another special day, the day the Ghost Storytelling Association gathers and continues to recount the things they have witnessed. Today, Truonkiat told a story about a short-haired girl he once met. Not long after graduating, I went to Shanghai to work at a comic design and creation company. Because we had to stay up all night to work, the director wasn't very strict about time, just needed to get the job done. Good quality work is fine. I was in Tan on Trang at that time. It was a remote area, so it was very quiet. The room is very large, closed on 2 floors, including 2 bedrooms and 1 living room, with no amenities at all, so things like TV, phone, etc. are even more absent. It doesn't matter to me whether those items are available or not. Due to the nature of my work, I like to have peace and don't want to be disturbed by anyone. The homeowner is a very friendly, gentle old woman about 60 years old. She didn't make it difficult for me to raise a dog, which is also the reason why I continue to rent her house. To show my goodwill, I sent her half a year's rent and continued to stay. I stopped what I was doing, stood up, stretched, then pulled a chair out to the balcony to bask in the sun. It's been almost a month since I moved here. I'm also adapting to this environment. The adorable dog came out of nowhere, jumped on my leg and raised its neck as if to say, "Master, please pay attention to me." Seeing me close my eyes and enjoy the fresh air, it immediately found a dog space on my lap to lie down. I gently stroked the little dog's soft fur, feeling its warmth. The warm sunlight shined through the leaves. I took a walk in the park of the house. The old people sitting in the park happily enjoyed the rare warmth of the cold winter. People gathered together year after year. Playing chess, people asking kindly, and occasionally hearing a few birds chirping. So quiet. I closed my eyes, dreaming passionately. Having lived for a while, I discovered that most of the people here were old people, only occasionally encountering a few middle-aged people. Seeing the elderly people living happily together, I don't want to bother them and rarely talk to them. But somehow, every time I meet the elderly, I have a feeling of not getting along, maybe because there are too many old people here. However, thinking that this environment is also suitable for the elderly to retire, that feeling of mine gradually disappeared. Let me buy half a cake of this type and 2 filled cakes. That's all I said in one day. But I like it that way. As long as I'm not disturbed, I can complete my work with peace of mind. The only thing I don't like very much is that the traffic near the house is not convenient at all. Every day I have to walk more than a mile to get to the nearby supermarket to buy things. It's so annoying. I don't understand how the old people here can live. Wearing canvas sandals, I held a cup of coffee and stood near the window and looked at the old people strolling in the park. If you pay a little attention, you'll discover that the elderly here never go shopping. Putting down the coffee cup, I turned around to look at the old clock hanging on the wall. It was 7:08, time to prepare dinner. Outside the window, snow was falling gently, everywhere was white. I stretched and finally completed a drawing. Looking closely, I felt very satisfied. Standing up to make a cup of coffee and not forgetting to look at the electronic clock placed at the head of the bed, it was already 2:15 a.m. Holding a hot cup of coffee in hand, he walked gently to open the window. Cold, dry air rushed into the house. I inhaled deeply as if trying to enjoy that bitter cold. Snow was still falling, covering the entire housing area. The lights in the apartments were also turned off. The space was dark, with only the red light from the street lamps. Southern China is a place where it rarely snows, so I took my small dog for a walk around the block to enjoy this rare snowy night. I often stay up all night and have the habit of taking my dog out early in the morning. This habit is to breathe the freshness of the early morning. My dog also gradually adapted to that. On the snowy road, we can always see the long and short footprints of the two of us. Rustle, suddenly I heard the sound of feet stepping on the snow echoing closer and closer. Is there still someone here this late? I turned towards the sound and thought it can't be a thief. Through the white snow, I saw a small, shimmering figure. It seems like a girl, I'm not really sure. The shadow walked closer to me, and it turned out to be a girl with short hair. She was wearing a white turtleneck and tight jeans, followed by a funny-looking Kinbei dog. Oh, it turns out it's a person walking his dog early in the morning. Why is he so similar to me, a lazy cat sleeping during the day, I thought. The girl walked closer to me. As she passed, she seemed a little scared, but I was the opposite. This close distance helped me see her face more clearly. An oval face, sparkling eyes, arched eyebrows, high nose, lovely small lips. The scene of a girl on a snowy night is a beautiful, heartwarming picture amid the cold winter. What a beautiful girl, I looked dazed. Let's go, the girl bowed her head and called softly and pulled the dog. The dog seemed to have seen its own kind and was attached to my dog, so it didn't go. My face was a bit red. I deliberately avoided looking at the girl and turned my eyes away. I seemed clumsy. The weather is beautiful. No, it's just starting to snow now. Or your coat is so bright? But she's wearing white, you're so beautiful. Oh, I can't say anything. Saying that seems so crude, I have to think of what to say. I'm racking my brain trying to think. The girl looked at me with surprised eyes, the two dogs also stopped and looked at each other with a questioning look. You just moved here. I've never seen you before. The girl asked gently. Oh, yes. I suddenly hesitated. The girl's voice was so gentle. Are you okay? Looking at my unnatural appearance, the girl smiled, revealing her dimples. Yes, right, that's right, you. I just moved in. What a coincidence. Are you also walking the dog this early in the morning? I felt awkward, nervous, and really wanted to say out loud, in the past 20 years, this is the first time a girl has proactively started a conversation with me. A moment later, the girl continued, your dog looks so cute. I pulled up my pants a little. Her dog didn't know what was wrong. Just after meeting her, she jumped up and bit my pants leg. The girl looked at the dog in surprise, then looked up at me and smiled, her pink lips revealing beautiful white teeth. The snow fell heavier. In the snow a man and a woman walked side by side, behind were two dogs running around playing. The girl and I chatted all the time. She asked about my job and I told her all my story. Are you a comic book artist? The girl asked in surprise. In general, he is still not considered an artist, just a person who does a normal job of drawing comics. I started to get used to it and talked much more naturally. Oh, have there been any comic books published yet? I really like watching comic books, this really surprised me. Horror story, the naughty girl stuck out her adorable tongue. The two of us talked very well. Her name was Tutin, a beautiful name, that's exactly who she was. That's all I know about her, but I don't really know anything else. I told her almost everything because she asked me. During this conversation, I gradually understood a little about her, at least her enthusiasm made me feel that she was an approachable girl. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. I didn't expect that we could talk for more than an hour. The phone that was in my pocket kept vibrating, reminding me it was time to go home to continue working. I have to go home too. Tutin said and smiled at me. I said, let me take you home. No, please go home quickly, he must be tired. Tutin pointed at my dog, making me unable to stop laughing. My fat dog looks tired, can't walk, can't breathe. It's a shame, so I'll go home first. Will you still come here for a walk tomorrow? I couldn't say anything, I was so embarrassed in front of Tutin. Tutin nodded without saying anything, as if her eyes contained a trace of sadness. Then see you tomorrow night? Seeing Tutin nod in agreement, I turned around, pulled the fat dog and kicked it in the butt a few times. I muttered with an uncomfortable look, looks like that's right. Let's lose weight for you. If we keep feeding you portions like this, you'll soon get diabetes. Tutin kept looking at my figure gradually moving away. Tutin slowly led the dog forward, the sound of rustling footsteps on the snow gradually faded. Tutin's footprints in the snow also faded and her figure also disappeared in the snowy night. The air was originally filled with scent, but now the wind blew to disperse those scents. It was as if the incident had never happened. When I got home, I couldn't sleep, my mind was always thinking about me and the girl. I kept tossing and turning, maybe because I was tired, I fell asleep without knowing it. When I woke up the next morning, I discovered that I had a fever and dizziness. It seemed like I had a very bad cold. It was finally dark. I arrived at the place where I met Tutin yesterday very early to wait for her. Suddenly, in the whiteness of the snow, a girl and a white can be a dog appeared. "You're really here?" I was a bit emotional because I didn't believe she could come today. "Yes, you don't seem to be feeling well or something, are you sick?" Tutin looked down in shame and asked me. "It's okay, it's just that eating too much makes me sick to my stomach," I said, trying hard to keep my nose from running. The snow has also stopped falling, the main roads of this area are now very clean. Late at night, the two of them sat side by side and told each other about their hobbies. On the third day, when I tried to sit up, I noticed that my flu seemed to be worse, even though I was paying attention. Keep warm, take medicine on time, and very strangely, the disease not only does not improve but gets worse day by day. When I met Tutin again, she looked at me with reproachful eyes and asked, "Why do you have a runny nose?" "It's okay, it's just too spicy," I said, smiling wryly. Over the next few days, my flu got worse, but I still tried to walk the dog at 2 o'clock at night. Even though my intuition told me it wasn't normal at all, I still wanted to meet her. After a week, around 5 p.m. "It's not good, the temperature is up to 40 degrees, if it keeps like this I'll probably die." I pulled the thermometer out from my armpit and threw it somewhere. "Try to get up, you have to go to the hospital." How can my illness be this serious? Trying to drag myself step by step, with great difficulty I was able to step out onto the street in fear. I walked slowly step by step, suddenly realizing that in front of me was Tutin in a school uniform, carrying a bag, approaching from afar. "It's her, she's a student," I thought. Tutin was laughing and chatting happily with her friends. From afar she saw me and bowed her head without saying anything, as if she wanted to avoid me as she passed by me. "Quiet," I called softly. Tutin's footsteps slowed down. When she was a few steps away from me, she stopped and turned towards me. I suddenly felt surprised. Tutin with those quick eyes looked at me with a scared look. She didn't really want to see me. After calming down for a moment, I felt like behind her fear was a look of pain. What's wrong with her? My heart ached a bit. I really felt surprised and didn't understand why I was so confused. Suddenly my legs felt like they were about to soften and I sat down on the ground. A darkness fell before my eyes and I asked to leave without knowing it. I woke up and dreamed a few times, woke up and then passed out again. I lay on the bed and covered myself with a very heavy cotton blanket. Where am I? I wanted to wake up but my body didn't have any strength left. Looking around, I realized I was lying in my room. It turned out that the landlady saw me faint and immediately took me home. I didn't understand how she brought a nearly dead body weighing more than 50 pounds into the house. These past few days, the landlady has been busy taking care of me. I really appreciate her concern. Before the old Oriental medicine doctor left, he stood in front of me, carefully instructing me to rest and a few things to pay attention to, but I don't remember them clearly. The only strange thing is that it's the 21st century. Why are there still people wearing AO from the past? It was very difficult for me to sit up, my whole body was in pain. I placed the pillow a little higher on my back and leaned on it comfortably. The little dog ran towards me. I haven't seen it in a few days. It's gained a lot of weight. It's really bothering the landlady. I gently stroked its muzzle. In my head I thought, she's a student, she has to go to school every day at about 6 o'clock, and walk her dog from 2 to 3 in the morning, so she only sleeps 3 hours a day. Even though she has sometimes I only sleep 2 to 3 hours, but if it lasts for 7 or 8 days like this, how can I stand it? It's hard to understand. Also, after meeting her I started getting sick, Could it be a coincidence? My constant thoughts made me fall asleep without even realizing it. Suddenly I felt very short of breath. I was like waking up from a nightmare. I took a deep breath but was suddenly awakened. At this time, I was horrified to discover that my two eyes could not be opened, as if they were glued together. I was even more afraid that I was aware that I could not wake up. As time passed, I still had difficulty breathing. I wanted to move but my body felt dead. Even moving a finger was difficult and I had no feeling of my body's existence. Fear keeps taking over all my thoughts. The coldness enveloped my fear again and it burrowed deep into my bones, fear spreading. Countless hidden thoughts appeared in my head, but very vague old memories appeared in my head, causing my head to suddenly hurt violently. Suddenly I woke up, my clothes were soaked with sweat. Looking around, it was still my room. So lucky. So lucky. I breathed deeply and wiped the sweat from my face. Suddenly there was a buzzing sound getting louder and louder from the head of the bed. It was really difficult for someone like me who had just experienced psychological states of fear to accept this noise. I heard it and breathed a sigh of relief when I discovered that it was the clock vibrated to say 2 o'clock. I'm a little tired, I just went through anxiety so I feel extremely empty. Knock. 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 The sound of knocking on the door was a heavy urge. It's already this late. What's wrong with the landlady looking for me? No one here knows me except her. Throwing the blanket off the bed and opening the door, my health still hadn't recovered, so as soon as I stood up my mind was spinning. I was about to answer a question but I suddenly felt nauseous. Bump, tap, tap, suddenly the knocking on the door turned into a very strong banging sound. My heart was pounding, that noise didn't stop. Those sounds seemed to be hitting my weak heart. I angrily looked at the door. Hearing this type of knocking, it certainly couldn't be the landlady. If it were her, she would gently knock on the door twice and the sound, although light, would have a clear rhythm and never be that loud. So who is it if not the landlady? Who could it be? The sound of pop, pop, it's probably not like the landlady was murdered by thieves. Otherwise, there's still no movement until now. What should I do? The more I thought about it, the more scared I became, my heart pounding every time. I know you're in the room, I have something to tell you. The knocking on the door suddenly stopped, and a woman's voice rang out. So it's Tutin. I breathed a sigh of relief and lay down on the bed like a paralyzed person. My health was already weak, combined with the recent fear that shocked me. Take a deep breath, calm down and open the door. Afraid that Tutin would be waiting outside for a long time, I called out, "Come here." As soon as I finished, my throat choked up, I had a bad feeling. How could it be her? She doesn't know where I live. I didn't say the banging on the door was so loud. Why didn't the landlady react, or did she do something to her? The more I thought about it, the more terrified I became and I couldn't stand it any longer. Quickly open the door, Tutin's voice urged more. It's true that she wants to. What? Did he come to harm me? Oh my God, I didn't dare to think any more. Outside, Tutin was full of anger, one hand holding tightly to the doorknob, and the other hand punching hard and fast at the door. The door suddenly became silent, her hands gradually loosened. Her eyes, which were always agile, now turned dull. Her emotionless eyes kept staring at the door and tears seemed to flow out with no way to hold them back. What made Tutin want to cry? She pulled her hand back, stared at the door, then sighed and turned to leave. Going down the stairs, she turned her head to look back at the door, and tears began to fall. Come. On the second day, the landlady was very happy to see that I could get out of bed and walk around. But I couldn't cheer up, Many thoughts kept lurking in my head. Who exactly was that girl? How did I know get my place? Why is she taking the dog out in the middle of the night? I couldn't find a reasonable explanation. One option is that she is not human. Up until now, I have always absorbed the idea of atheism, which makes me even more unwilling to believe in this speculation. But everything that happened had absolutely no reasonable explanation. Maybe it's just a coincidence. I don't understand what the truth is. But at this moment I was scared and thought I had to defend myself. Resilience only appears when the critical moment comes. I believe in myself. From that day on, every night she knocked on my door and wanted to see me, but I didn't open it. From now on, every time I hear her screaming like crazy when calling the door, I am not afraid of affecting the people around me because I know that only I can hear her voice. There is no doubt about this. A few days ago I asked the landlady and answered, "You have never heard of any girl like that in this area, nor have you heard anyone come looking for me, but..." I haven't finished speaking yet, she said. "There is no one like that here, but about 40 years ago, there was a girl who went missing and later someone discovered her body in this area." The story is very simple yet I don't understand anything. Whether she's telling the truth or lying, I've decided to end everything here. Tonight I will end my relationship with Tutin. I sat behind the door and didn't say a word, quietly waiting for her to come. My head was tense like a bowstring, just waiting to shoot, with my right hand holding a knife, my left hand holding an empty cigarette. "Stop raising it to your mouth and hiss, the clock shows 12:20. In the silent room there is only the tick 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 sound of the clock hands. It's already 1 o'clock at night. My fat dog seemed to smell something. Its round body trembled and crouched under the bed. It's 1:40 a.m. She's here, she's almost there. The cigarette vibrated, her fingers felt weak, and the cigarette butts fell into a pile on the ground. I lit another cigarette, constantly glancing at the clock placed on the bedside, 1:50 a.m. The half-smoked cigarette in my hand was immediately thrown to the ground. I stood up, extremely uncomfortable, looking at the door. My breathing quickened, my hand holding the knife tighter, my eyes always glaring at the pile of clocks, waiting so long, and yet it was only 1 hour and 52 minutes. I breathed very hard. The smoke-filled room made me even more uncomfortable. My hand holding the knife began to tremble as if at any moment it would cut everything. This stress is driving me crazy. I can't stand this feeling anymore. I'm exhausted like a deflated balloon. The clock only showed 1 hour 59 minutes. The clock hand kept ticking every second. I never noticed the movement of the second hand before. Now I see it moving heavily every second. Every minute slowly passed. My nerves were like a string being stretched. Just a small fear could break that string. Like an arrow, once shot, it cannot be retrieved. Waiting all night made my butt numb in the chair. When the clock passed 2 o'clock, there was smoke everywhere. The room was filled with silence. It was already 2:40. Up to this point nothing has happened. The cat also disappeared into the night. This night is so quiet, I have a premonition that she will definitely come. The more stressed I became, the longer I smoked, and the cigarette butts were everywhere on the ground. I stood up, having been sitting there for 2 hours, my legs were numb. I sighed and scolded myself, what a useless person. Cigarette butts continued to scatter on the ground. My right hand was placed more comfortably. Knock, knock, knock. The knocking on the door started to get clearer. I was a bit panicked. She finally came. His dull eyes quickly opened wide. His right hand firmly held the knife and quickly hid it behind his back. Tutin stood outside the door. When the door opened, she raised her head and looked at me sadly. After a while, Ting coldly said, "Finally, I opened the door." I looked at her and was silent. "Did you see something unusual?" Ting forced a smile at me. "Beauty is so cold." "Yes," I also replied coldly, not knowing why at this moment I felt my heart aching, my hand holding the knife shaking. "I'm leaving tomorrow." Ting looked sad, as if he wanted to say something more, but couldn't say it out loud. She pursed her lips, looked at me, then turned and left. Unreasonable anger suddenly covered my whole head. What is it? Just rush away without saying anything, without explaining anything. Thinking about the past few days I've been lying in a hospital bed, I feel like I want to let go of all my anger so I can make up for all the pain and frustration I've experienced up until now. Breathing quickly, both hands raised the knife hidden behind her back, using all his strength to slash at her. Poof! The knife slashed right into the door. The girl walked quietly for a while, bowed her head and walked straight forward, without looking back, then gradually disappeared at the end of the stairs. I realized what I had just done, and quickly took a few steps back. Looking at my hands, if the knife hadn't been stabbed into the door, my arms would have been stained with blood. I don't know what to do now. The knife still clings very firmly to the door. I sat down, my arms and legs tired, sweat rolling slowly down my cheeks down to my chin. That night I thought a lot and decided to move house. The very next day, when I talked to the landlady, she was not surprised at all, which surprised me even more. "Did you know I was moving today, or did you know in advance?" "Of course it doesn't matter anymore, what matters is that I moved out. I will not get my rent back as a way to thank you for your care during the past time. The South rarely has snow, so it's strange that it snowed several times this winter. My mood and health have improved somewhat, I have gradually gotten better and don't want to think about the past, she has disappeared from my mind. Winter comes and spring comes again, green fills the space, everything becomes new and more lively, the snow gradually melts, creating countless small streams of water long on the ground. On the west side of the one-way street, there are many people. Back and forth, I walked in an excited mood. I am now moving to the Ngayat Kyveen area. Work is still as light as ever, sitting alone at a nearby cafe, sipping and enjoying a cup of coffee. Having just moved here not long ago, I discovered that this shop's coffee has a very rich flavor. I like it, so whenever I have free time I come here to drink coffee. And every time I come, I choose a position close to the window. Life is too monotonous, every day repeating the same sadness and happiness. Sometimes it reminds me of what happened in the Tan and Trang area half a year ago. I remember that on the day I moved out, because I was sick for a long time and didn't go to the hospital, the doctor saw my appearance and said, "I'm not human, I'm not a ghost, I look like a wanderer and it takes a whole month to return to the desert." This doesn't really affect my psychology. I very quickly turned this incident into a comic story between humans and demons, with a few points that are a bit different from reality. Tin will probably read this book because she loves comics. Deep down I hope she reads this book. It also replaces the conclusion I always hoped for. Okay, no more thinking about it. It's already happened, so don't think too much about it. Even though I know that, I'm still haunted by that memory. Leaning back in the chair, watching people walking in the sunlight, I enjoy life and feel more relaxed. This is the true value of enjoyment in my life. Haha, that's strange, there seems to be something strangely different. I couldn't concentrate all afternoon today, occasionally picking up a pen and paper to work, but still didn't get any results. I kept looking at the passers-by, it was already 5 o'clock. I was in high spirits. Suddenly, a familiar figure appeared before my eyes. I immediately recognized it as Tutin. Her long hair and beautiful bright black eyes have not changed. She is still wearing her school uniform, carrying a school bag and smilingly walking down the street with her friends. Leaving the coffee money on the table, I ran out into the street. I honestly don't know why I did that. When I saw her again, I felt lost, unable to control myself. I followed her on the bus, sat far away from her, got to the bus stop near Tan and Trang area and got off. The road back was so deep that there was not a single person in sight. I was just afraid of being discovered by her because there was not a single person on the whole road. This area has not changed. La 2 May 61, the only difference is that the trees are lush but not too dense. Do I still have the feeling that something is missing? Meeting a few acquaintances in the area, I said a few quick hellos and then continued to follow her. Tutin suddenly turned around and disappeared from sight. I hid around the corner, sighed and scratched my head in confusion. Nobody, blink your eyes and you won't see anyone. I was surprised that it was only about 50 meters from this place to the first house number in the area. How could it disappear so quickly? Looking around, I couldn't see any sign of her. I knew I had lost sight of her or she had discovered someone was following her. That's it then. The story between me and her ended half a year ago, so why bother trying to find out any more? That's right, isn't that the house I rented before the landlady took good care of me? Once you get here, come visit her for a bit. She was also pitiful and alone, and I had never heard of her children or grandchildren. I rang the bell hoping she was home. Who is it? I'm going to open the door. Her voice was still gentle and gentle like that. Grandma, my name is Truonkiet, I answered. Oh, come in here quickly. The door is open. She immediately recognized me. It seemed like she still remembered me very clearly. She hasn't aged much, she even looks younger. Her carefree laughter did not completely cover the loneliness that appeared in her eyes. I said I happened to pass by here today and turned to ask her. It could also be that her life is so lonely that my visit makes her very happy. It was getting dark. I asked permission to leave, took 500 yuan from my wallet and gave it to her as a gift. She insisted on not taking it, but I still gave it to her. She had to take it. Refuse her invitation to leave. Under the dim light of the street lamp, I continued to think. Life is so impermanent, no one can predict what will happen in the future, and I don't know how the two of us will change when we meet again. Going out of the gate of the house, I saw a taxi parked in front of me, which was lucky, because there are very few taxis here. Uncle, are you going to the city? I called out to the driver from afar. Yes, 100 yuan, the driver glanced at me haughtily. It's so expensive, from here I don't want to go to the city for $6, even though I said that, I still took out my wallet to look. If I'm not mistaken, after giving away 500 yuan, I only had change in my wallet, probably not enough. 100 yuan. Ah, where is the credit card? Suddenly, I discovered that the card had no wings and was flying away. I looked over and over at my wallet but still couldn't find the card, nor could I find it in my pocket. Could it have fallen at the landlady's house? I thought. Just now when I was walking on the street, my hands were always in my pockets. It seemed like it could only fall at my grandmother's house. I paid no attention to the driver's surprised eyes and turned around to head towards the house. The moonlight was gloomy and night fell, making this area even colder. I shivered. It's summer, why is it so cold? I felt so restless. I raised my head and saw that the lights of the surrounding households had turned off, with only a few street lights still flickering. There is something a bit dark and cold. Take a deep breath and you will see that it is not cold but something very hard to describe. For no reason, I scared myself to the point of sweating. I cursed myself for being useless, pulled my shirt back and quickly walked forward. Just past the turn, I almost bumped into the landlady. "Do you have to go out?" I called to ask. She didn't seem to hear, holding the lane in her left hand and walking very quickly. "Grandma, it's me." I chased after her and called loudly, but she seemed to deliberately not hear me. Strange. I stopped, looked at the shadow getting farther and farther away and felt confused. I had never made my dad angry. I didn't understand what was wrong with her. Watching her disappear, I suddenly realized how light her steps were, as if flying in the air. Rubbing her eyes, she looked back and the old lady was indeed walking too fast. This road is not long, only about 300 meters, not as flat as my mood right now. She has completely changed, unlike the person I used to know. I followed until there was a large empty lot in front of me, with an old flat-roofed house in the middle. Mrs. Chong stood in front of the house, pulled out the key to open the door, but could not fit it into the lock several times. The dark night made it difficult for me to see her movements clearly. I was surprised because I had never seen this house before. Maybe it was just built in the past half year. That's not right. This house is very old. It must have been built at least a few years ago. It's an indescribable feeling. How long has this house been here? Maybe I remember wrong. Otherwise, where did this house come from? I thought that over and over again. The creaking sound continued. She entered the house and closed the door. A moment later, the room was lit up with a dim firelight like sunset and glimmering through the window. What is it anyway? I was surprised to find the old woman so strange. I was a bit hesitant, but my curiosity arose again. I looked around and saw no one, so I moved forward. The window was covered in dust, and I could vaguely see her taking the food out of the box and placing it on the table close to the wall. After preparing, she took out an object that looked like a tablet from her body and placed it behind the food table. It seems like burning incense for someone, I guessed. Growing up in the city, so I rarely encountered these customs. Maybe burn incense for your husband. I sympathize because living in loneliness is not simple at all. Or go home and wait. People burn incense for their husbands, so don't bother them. I looked at her sympathetically and then turned away. My heart was still heavy. Why do so many things go wrong in human life? There are gains and losses, so we must cherish what we have. Present. Thinking about it for a while, I arrived in front of her house, found a place on the grass to rest. My stomach started to rumble, then I remembered that I hadn't had anything in my stomach since morning. Sitting bored, I pulled out my phone, flipped it over and over to check the time, and sat hugging my knees as if I was about to fall asleep. "Tu Truong, why are you here?" I vaguely heard her call. "Are you home?" I quickly stood up and smiled awkwardly. "You came back to look for the credit card, right? Hey. Quickly get inside the house." She brushed the dirt and dry grass off my body, smiling and talking enthusiastically. I always hope she is always this happy. Yes, yes. I was so happy. "Come in. What are you doing standing there? You haven't eaten yet, right?" Luckily I still have food at home. She quickly pulled me into the house. "Come on, sit down. The credit card is on the table, put it away, don't lose it." She opened the cage that covered the food and placed it on the table. "Eat, kid. Are you hungry?" She looked at me with kindness. I looked at her emotionally and discovered that her eyes were a bit swollen and red. I didn't need to guess and I understood. Before, I paid little attention to these things. Now I hope her life is happier. "Grandma, what's wrong? What's wrong with your eyes?" I asked. "It's okay, you're an old woman who often thinks nonsense," she replied reluctantly as if wanting to hide something. "That's it? A reasonable reason," I didn't say anything more. "Eat slowly so you don't choke." She poured me water. "Thank you," I said while chewing because I was so hungry. She looked at me affectionately, her eyes filled with love. "How are you and that girl?" She seemed to like seeing my eating like a lobster. "Who?" I raised my head and asked in surprise. "The girl who used to stay here and once yelled at you. You told me about it, but have you forgotten? We broke up." She still remembers my story? What a pity. I don't know whose family's children are. I can't help you at all. It's not like that, I can handle it myself. Don't worry, if I have a girlfriend, I'll definitely bring her to meet you. Yes, tinged. If you had a child, he would have grown up." She looked without saying another word. Maybe she is thinking about the past, about fate. I blamed myself. I wanted her to cheer up a little, but I thought it would be good for her to ask for me. "Think carefully, you're someone who likes to meddle in other people's business, but rest assured, you won't ruin anything." She smiled sadly. "Yes, I wanted to solve it myself, but then I thought it would be better if you helped me. You made delicious rice. I'm full." I put down my chopsticks, wiped my mouth and said, "I only know her name is Tutin." I described her appearance to her. To be honest, I still had some hope in my heart. Otherwise, why would I have hastily followed her all the way here after seeing Tutin? She was packing up her bowl and chopsticks while listening to me. When she heard the words Tutin, her face suddenly changed color. I described Tutin's physical appearance. Her hand shook and then clang, the sound of the bowl falling and shattering on DAD 9621. "Who did you say? Say it again." "Tutin." "Do you know her too?" I'm also really stupid. Her reaction is like that and I have to ask. "That's right, it's Tin Nhi." Mrs. Chuang sat down on the chair in a daze, her shoulders shaking. It seems like she already knows Tutin. I find it very strange because if they know each other, why have they never met? "Grandma, what's wrong with you?" Seeing that there was something unusual about her, I still hoped that nothing would happen. Tin Nhi. Mom was wrong, she was really wrong. Come see me, I miss you so much. She stretched out her hands and gently stroked the air. Her eyes were dull, her lips pursed, tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong with you?" "It's just that my mouth often talks nonsense." "That's right, you can meet Tin Nhi, tell Tin Nhi to come see you, you're his mother, you miss him very much," she cried and begged. "If you do this, you will lose your life." I quickly helped her stand up. She didn't say anything. There was only crying in the room. I didn't know what to say to comfort her. After a while, her voice spoke up. "Tutin is your daughter." This sentence made me understand all of her unusual expressions just now. This was so unexpected that it surprised me. "It's all because of you," she cried, and told in a desperate voice. "That year, the demons were like wolves. They came to massacre and burn people's houses. The people who were unable to fight back all fled to other places." I felt a bit shaken. The word demons was so strange. I only met demons when watching movies. Not knowing what misfortune she had encountered, I quietly listened. At that time, she ran away to a relatively remote area, thinking that life would be peaceful, but those cruel landlords came to collect taxes. Poor families don't have money, landlords don't let them beg for a single day. Seeing that she couldn't pay the taxes, he forced Tin Nhi to be his concubine. She, she was so confused at that time, thinking that being the landlord's concubine was better than having to endure suffering and poverty. She didn't pay attention to Tin. "Do you agree or not?" Saying this, she burst into tears, took out a handkerchief to wipe it, and continued, "Tin Nhi must have been very angry and scared." Without saying a word to her, she left in the night. Since then, she still hasn't returned. Some people say Tin Nhi is dead, but she doesn't believe it. Over the years, many people have said they have met her, but she doesn't want to meet a mother like her. She's wrong, you shouldn't force her. Marrying a landlord, you were wrong. But it was only because you wanted the best for him, you didn't want him to be like you, selling your back to heaven and selling your face to the earth, just hoping he would get a good place. Mrs. Chuang could no longer speak. I listened and found it strange. During the war against Japan, she was just over 30 years old. If she lived until now, she would be 100 years old. But it seems that she is only over 60 years old, and I haven't seen her for half a year and I don't see much change in her. So what happened? I started to feel scared, feeling like there was something unusual about this house. Looking at the old woman, I felt like I was sweating. I really couldn't sit still, looking for an excuse to excuse myself. I came out of her house and ran as fast as I could, hoping I had wings to quickly fly out of this evil housing complex. I also understand why living here always feels unusual, why cars don't have drivers but just park far away, why the elderly here have so many unusual expressions. I didn't allow myself to stop, I just kept running. There was no wind on the road, but the trees around me were swaying as if shaken by the wind. While running, I looked at the trees on the side of the road. Suddenly the lush trees turned dry and withered, the wind blew stronger, dry leaves rustled in the sky. I ran as fast as I could, not knowing anything else. At this time, the rows of houses built of red bricks and white walls close to the side of the road suddenly turned into rows of horses. The wide, straight road turned into rough and winding paths. I rushed forward, it was already the exit. A cold wave appeared, I felt the landlady flying closer to me, I felt goosebumps. She urged repeatedly, "Take me to see Tin Nhi, take me to see Tin Nhi." I didn't dare turn my head to look, and I didn't want to hear any sound. I closed my eyes and ran like crazy, just worried that the big gate ahead would suddenly close. Suddenly, the paper houses on both sides of the path caught fire, blue flames glimmering dimly like the flames of crazy resentment under the 9 levels of hell. Something tripped my leg, I fell down, my face widened, I got up but couldn't lift myself up. My face was planted on the ground and I was dragging my feet step by step. It was only when I had probably run out of this area that I dared to raise my face and look around. The scene that appeared before my eyes was much more horrifying. My body felt numb and lifeless, I wanted to scream loudly, my eyes glared at the scene before me, my mind was truly blank. A series of black tombstones appeared before my eyes. I have a heavy feeling with no way out. The ground is covered with faint clouds of smoke that blend with the humidity that covers the entire space. There seems to be something behind. I was startled and jumped like a spring, screaming in fear. I looked around in horror and couldn't find anything. Looking down and seeing a tombstone, I seemed to have reached the end of my fear. In the dark night, an old tombstone appeared, with a few vague words engraved on it. Chuang Gai, 1919 to 1974. My legs could no longer carry this body, suddenly like a person whose whole body was paralyzed and unable to move. Chuang Gai. Landlady's name. Fear makes the mind dull, the fog becomes thicker and thicker. Mom, Please let him go. Tin's voice suddenly rang out. Tin Nhi, did you agree to come out here to meet me? I really miss you, the mother's pleading voice replied. Mom, let him go. Tin said. I know you like it, can you keep it for me? Ms. Chuang's voice sounded like she was worried about something. Let him go, Mom, I'll come see you. Tin cried. I breathed a sigh of relief, feeling like my body had been relieved of a burden. I jumped up like a crazy person and ran out of the cemetery. It was very difficult to escape from the pile of graves. I fell to the ground, vomited and then passed out. It was raining heavily, rainwater poured down on the ground. I woke up, my mind was dizzy and I couldn't stand up on the slippery and wet ground. Looking at the scene before my eyes, I also remembered this is where I used to live. The big gate of the house became a small tattered gate, above was hung a sign, Tan and Trang Cemetery. Inside the tomb, a ghostly fire flickered, flickering to reveal the place that used to be Miss Chuang Gai's house. I was like a mentally ill person, running like hell. On the road, a few taxis chased me and asked me where I wanted to go. I ran and glanced at those cars. Oh my God, why are there so many fake cars? End of chapter 6, see you again in the next chapter.
Thank you for taking the time to watch Ghost Stories video. Hopefully the content has brought you interesting and meaningful moments. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the Ghost Stories YouTube channel to follow the channel's next videos. See you in the next video. Have a good day.